Hi, I am Dr. R.S. Tiwari. Today I am going to talk on overview of operating system. Friends, what is an operating system? By definition, a software that manages computer hardware and software resources and provides common services to the application programs as well as users is called as operating system. There are two analogies which would be useful in understanding the operating system, namely tape recorder and cassette, and another analogy is car and driver. For better appreciation, I would like to give these analogies in Marathi. तर अशी कल्पना करा की आपल्याला गावाला जायचं आहे आणि आपण एक टॅक्सी बुक केलेली आहे. आता आपण टॅक्सीत बसल्यानंतर टॅक्सी तर काय स्वतः चालवणार नाहीये. मग आपण काय करणार आहोत तर आपण त्या ड्रायव्हरला सांगू की आपल्याला पुण्याला जायचं आहे. एवढी सूचना दिली की तुम्ही गाडीत बसायचं आणि गाडी आपोआप चालायला लागेल. तर ड्रायव्हर तुम्हाला पुण्याला घेऊन जाईल आणि पुण्याला गेल्यानंतर मग तुम्ही त्याला सांगाल की आता आपल्याला इथून चिंचवडला जायचं आहे. लगेच तो गाडी वळवणार आणि चिंचवडला जाणार. मग चिंचवडला गेल्यानंतर तुम्ही सांगाल की मला अमुक अमुक चौकामध्ये जायचं आहे आणि तिथून लेफ्ट टर्न घेऊन पुढे जायचं आहे. तर ह्या प्रवासामध्ये आपण त्या टॅक्सीशी बोलत नाहीये, तर आपण त्या ड्रायव्हरला सूचना देत आहोत. परंतु आपण गाडीत बसल्यानंतर गाडी मात्र आपल्याला नाशिकहून थेट पुण्याला घेऊन जाते आणि तिथे देखील अमुक जी काय आपली स्पेसिफिक जागा असेल त्या जागेवरती ती नेऊन आपल्याला सोडते. तर ह्या प्रक्रियेमध्ये आपण टॅक्सी ही जी काय हार्डवेअर आहे त्याच्याशी डायरेक्टली कुठेही इंटरॅक्ट करत नाहीये, तर आपण त्या गाडी चालक जो आहे ड्रायव्हर त्याला सूचना देतो आणि आपल्या सूचनेप्रमाणे तो टॅक्सी चालवतो आणि आपल्याला हवं त्या ठिकाणी घेऊन जातो. तर मित्र हो, जेव्हा तुम्ही संगणक विकत आणता आणि घरी आल्यानंतर तो आपण जेव्हा मेन्स पॉवर सप्लायला कनेक्ट करतो आणि त्याला सुरू करतो, तर सुरू केल्यानंतर कोणताही संगणक काहीही करू शकत नाही. फक्त त्याचे तुम्हाला लाईट्स ऑन झालेले दिसतील, त्याच्या पलीकडे त्या संगणकावर कोणत्याही प्रकारची हालचाल तुम्हाला दिसणार नाही. अगदी गाडीसारखं आहे. तुम्ही नवीन गाडी विकत आणा आणि नवीन गाडी विकत आणल्यानंतर ती जर तुम्हाला त्या शोरूमच्या माणसाने घरी आणून जर सोडून दिली असेल गाडी, तर तिथून ती गाडी तुम्हाला पुढे चालवण्याकरता एक तर तुम्हाला स्वतःला गाडी चालवणं शिकणं गरजेचं आहे, नाही तर ड्रायव्हर तुम्ही अपॉइंट करा. जर तुम्हाला गाडी चालवता येत नसेल तर तुम्ही ती गाडी चालवू शकत नाही आणि तुम्ही कोणत्याही प्रकारची सूचना दिली तर त्या गाडीला काही कळणार नाही, कारण ती तशीही निर्जीव आहे. तर ह्याचप्रमाणे जेव्हा आपण संगणक नव्याने विकत घेतो आणि घरी आणतो, तर त्या संगणकावरती जर काही काम करायचं असेल तर त्यासाठी गाडीच्या ड्रायव्हरसारखा एक ड्रायव्हर म्हणजे संगणक चालवणारा ड्रायव्हर त्या ठिकाणी असणं गरजेचं आहे, जेणेकरून तुमचं जे काम करण्याची पद्धत आहे आणि काम करून घेण्याचा जो एक सोपेपणा आहे तो त्यामध्ये येऊ शकतो. टॅक्सीत बसल्यानंतर तुम्हाला कुठेही स्टेअरिंग धरायची नाही किंवा ब्रेक अप्लाय करायचा नाही किंवा ऍक्सिलेटर दाबायचं नाही, काहीही करावं लागत नाही. तुम्ही फक्त त्या ड्रायव्हरला सूचना देता की चला पुण्याला जाऊया. तसंच संगणक विकत आणल्यानंतर त्या ठिकाणी जर तुम्ही त्या संगणक चालवणारा एक ड्रायव्हर जर ठेवला, तर तुम्ही फक्त ड्रायव्हरला सांगायचं की मला असा एक प्रिंटआउट पाहिजे, मला अमुक पाहिजे, मला तमुक पाहिजे, आणि कम्प्युटर ते तुमच्यासाठी करणार. मग आता हा ड्रायव्हर कोण? तर मित्र, हा ड्रायव्हर दुसरा तिसरा कोणी नसून ही एक ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम आहे. तर ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम ही संगणक ड्रायव्हरचं काम करते. तर ही जी ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम आहे, ही ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम संगणकाची देखभाल करते, संगणक सुरू करते, संगणकाचे जे विविध पेरिफेरल्स आहेत, उदाहरणार्थ कीबोर्ड आहे, माऊस आहे, प्रिंटर आहे, या सगळ्यांमध्ये एक प्रकारचा समन्वय घडवून आणते. आणि इतकंच नव्हे तर तुम्ही ज्या काही सूचना द्याल, प्रिंटिंगच्या सूचना असतील, डेटा एंट्रीच्या सूचना असतील, तर त्या सगळ्या ती तुमच्याकडून घेते आणि संगणक जो आहे हार्डवेअर, त्या हार्डवेअरला ती पोहोचवते. तर अशा प्रकारे संगणकाचा वापर हा खूप सुटसुटीत होतो. आणखी एक मी तुम्हाला अॅनॉलॉजी देतो, जेणेकरून तुम्हाला संगणकातला जो ही ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीमची कन्सेप्ट आहे ही चांगली कळेल. तर ती म्हणजे टेप रेकॉर्डर. तुम्ही बाजारात गेलात आणि एक चांगला नवीन टेप रेकॉर्डर विकत घेऊन घरी घेऊन आलात. आता हा टेप रेकॉर्डरचं बटन तुम्ही ऑन केलं तर तुम्हाला काही गाणं ऐकू येणार नाही. तेव्हा नुसतं टेप रेकॉर्डर विकत घेऊन त्याच्यावरती कोणत्याही प्रकारचं गाणं असेल, भजन असेल, काहीही तुम्हाला ऐकता येत नाही. तर मित्रहो, त्याच प्रकारे जेव्हा तुम्ही संगणक आणता तर नुसतं संगणक सुरू करून तुम्हाला कोणत्याही प्रकारचं काम त्यावर करता येत नाही. तर टेप रेकॉर्डर जेव्हा आपण विकत घेतो त्याचबरोबर तुम्हाला कॅसेट देखील विकत घ्याव्या लागतात. वेगवेगळ्या गाण्यांच्या कॅसेट तुम्ही विकत घ्यायच्या आणि त्या घेऊन यायच्या आणि त्या टेप रेकॉर्डरमध्ये टाकल्या की मग मात्र तुम्हाला गाणे ऐकू येतात. तर तशाच प्रकारे संगणकावरती ही ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम तुम्हाला सर्वात प्रथम इन्स्टॉल करावी लागते आणि ती एकदा इन्स्टॉल झाली की त्यानंतर मात्र तुम्हाला पाहिजे ते काम संगणकाकडून करून घेता येते. तर अशा प्रकारे ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीमचं अत्यंत महत्व आहे. तर आपण आता ह्या ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीमची अधिक माहिती बघणार आहोत. नाउ बिफोर वी गो इन टू द डिटेल्स ऑफ ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम, लेट अस फर्स्ट ट्राय टू अंडरस्टँड लिटिल बिट अबाउट अ कॉम्प्युटर सिस्टीम. There are various components of computer system. There are input devices, there are output devices, there is central processing unit, there is main memory, and there is also a secondary memory. Now, any kind of data or instruction that needs to be given to the computer is to be given through the input device. For example, you want to type your name and then write a letter to your friend. All that you have to do through the input device, and there are two important or very popular input devices these days used on the computer. Those are namely keyboard and mouse. With the help of keyboard, you can make the data entry of alphanumeric characters, that is 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 9, that is numbers, and also characters from A to Z. So for data entry of alphanumeric data, you can use keyboard. And for graphical input, for example, you want to draw a rectangle, you want to draw a circle, or you want to point out some graphic object on the screen, you have to use a mouse. So these two devices have become very popular these days, and with the help of these two devices, you can enter any kind of data into a computer. Once this data goes into the computer, there is a central processing unit, and this central processing unit picks up that data, picks up the instruction that you have given through the input device, and then processing starts. Now, in order to do any kind of processing, like a human being, even for human beings, suppose you ask your friend to find out the product of 15 into 13. Now, for some friends, it may be very difficult to find out the product because they may not remember the tables of 15 and 13. For that matter, you take even larger numbers like 37 into 45. This is even more difficult than earlier example. So in such cases, what we do, we take out the pen and write down intermediate values on paper and ultimately get the total result and tell your friend. Similarly, any computer for doing intermediate calculations and then arriving at the final result, it requires it requires some high-speed memory, and that memory is known as main memory or primary memory, and is also called as RAM, that is random access memory. So, along with input devices, central processing unit, there is a main memory in a computer. Now, sometimes the data may be very large, and the processing may take longer time, and let us say at the end of the office hours, you have to shut down the computer and start resume your work next day. So then what do you do? Whatever data you have entered and whatever result you have obtained, you have to save it. Otherwise, you have to begin total processing from tomorrow morning. That is not desirable. Friends, so in order to save your intermediate values permanently, there is a secondary device. And secondary devices these days are available in the form of hard disk, pen drives, CD-ROM, and many other things are there. So basically, hard disk is used for storing values permanently, and that is why it is called as secondary memory. So all the high-speed calculations are done in primary memory, and permanently values are stored on the secondary memory. And once the result is obtained, naturally you want output. So the output is given in the form of a display on the computer monitor or display or rather the printout on the hard copy through a printer. Of course, output through printer is costly because every time you have to use paper, and that is a wastage of time, wastage of paper, and it has a cost. And therefore, most of the people these days use computer monitors to get the output. So friends, this is how computer is constituted or has a structure or architecture. And now we are going to study how this computer structure or architecture is managed by the operating system. Now the architecture which we described just now is shown diagrammatically in the on the screen. So look at the screen. There is an input device, there is CPU, there is output devices, then primary, there is main memory, and secondary memory are there. So with this architecture in mind, we proceed for hardware and software details. Now as far as the hardware details are concerned, we just saw that computer hardware consists of input devices, output devices, primary memory, secondary memory, and CPU. And of course there are few more details which we would not like to cover in this lecture. We will be covering them in our future lectures. Now coming to software, basically there are two types of software: a system software and application software. Now first I will talk about the application software. Now if engineer is working on the computer, naturally he will be interested in design of bridges, design of structures, or he may be interested in design of gears, design of machines, and therefore his areas of applications will be totally different. On the contrary, when doctor is working on the computer, he may be interested in a variety of diagnostic tools, or he may be interested in the history of patients. And if, let us say, some accountant is working on the computer, he will be dealing with accounting system, financial accounting values. And therefore, his applications would be applications like Tally. And when architect is working on a computer, naturally he will be using AutoCAD, through which he can have different designs done on paper. So friends, different professionals use different applications, and therefore all these software used by a variety of professionals is known as application software. Some of the names of application softwares are like Microsoft Office, in which there is a Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Then there are softwares like Tally, software like AutoCAD, softwares like Maya, 3D Max, Flash. A variety of application softwares are there. In fact, there are thousands and thousands of softwares used by a variety of professionals. It's a wide spectrum, right from entertainment industry to serious industrial designs. People use software applications. But in addition to these all application software, there is one important software which is mandatory and has to be installed on computer, and that is the operating system. Operating system is part of the system software. Like application software, system software also has different parts. Like there are compilers, there are linkers, there are loaders, there are utilities. So in addition to these system software components, operating system component is extremely important, because in order to run any application software, operating system is a must. Like in a vehicle, you require a driver to drive a vehicle. A driver could be a other person, or you have to work like a driver, but a human driver has to be there in every car, and then only car can run. So friends, in order to get work done by the computer, you need to have the operating system. Now, what is the actual purpose of this operating system? The purpose is simply to manage variety of devices connected to the computer. Just we saw that there are input devices, there are output devices, primary memory, secondary memory, and many more things. So all these things are controlled by that operating system. Just like a car, Driver has to maneuver the steering, he has to apply brake, he has to push accelerator, he has to push a button for indicator and so on. And in fact, he has to switch on the car, switch off the car. Similarly, for booting the system, you require the operating system. Now, the diagram that you see on the screen very clearly highlights the importance and function of the operating system. As you can see, at the bottom there is a hardware. Sitting on top of the hardware there is operating system. And on top of operating system there are various applications, that is application software. And at the top is the user. That is, whenever you want to get some work done from the computer, what you do? Either you write some application software yourself or purchase software. Suppose you want to write a letter to your friend. Open the Microsoft Office. It is assumed that you have a Microsoft Office software on your computer. So open the Microsoft Office and click on Word. The Word document will open, and in that Word document you have to start writing letter to your friend. So in this way you will be using this application software for writing your application, that is in this case a letter to your friend. So as a user you are actually working on the application software, and consequently application software is actually sitting on the operating system and it is getting done from work done from the operating system. And then operating system actually controls the hardware, and ultimately whatever letter you have written gets stored on the hard disk. And from there, if you want a hard copy, you issue the command print. Immediately print command issued by you goes to the application software, and then application software actually issues the command, that is, it calls the system call from operating system, and then operating system issues a command to the printer to print a letter. So this is how letters get printed. So there are various layers through which the work gets done. So on the top, you are there as a user, you are actually giving commands, and actually hardware is getting work done for you by receiving the commands from applications and operating system. Now, basic functions of operating system. Operating system does many things what I have mentioned so far. For example, when you press a button on the computer, it is the operating system which issues various commands to the central processing unit, to the input devices, to the output devices, and so on, and gets the system booted. So booting the computer system is one of the important functions of operating system. Next, it has to perform basic computer tasks for like managing the various peripheral devices. Now, what are peripheral devices? Peripheral devices are the devices which are connected to the computer. For example, we connect keyboard, we connect mouse, we connect printer, we connect microphone, then we connect plotter, we connect monitor. Sometimes we also connect our mobile phone to the computer because we want to take backup of our SMS, or we want to transfer images that we have captured on the mobile phone to the computer hard disk. So in this way, variety of peripherals are connected to the computer, and the coordination between all these peripherals, for example, taking data from the mobile phone and transferring to the hard disk of a computer, is done by the operating system. So the operating system acts like a coordinator between all the peripherals that are connected to the computer. So this is also one of the important tasks performed by the operating system. The next function is user interface. If you don't install the operating system on the computer and simply switch on the computer and sit in front of the computer, you will find that nothing appears on the screen. If you press keys on the keyboard, nothing will happen. You move the mouse, still nothing happens. So, in order to interact with the user, some interface has to be there. Once you install the operating system, you have two options. One option is command-based interface and another option is so-called graphical user interface. Friends, in early days, early 70s and 80s, computer had very little power and could only afford providing so-called command-based interface. That is, in old days, you could only type commands on the keyboard and get the output in the form of text displayed on the screen. But as you know, these days, the computing power has increased to such an extent that we are now able to talk to the computer even through microphone. We are able to interact with the computer through various graphical objects that appear on the screen. You can click on the menu and sub-menus fall down. There are various options. Click on any option of your choice and get the work done. Now, who does all these things for you? It is the operating system. When operating system starts, it creates a graphical user interface on the screen, and through that interface you are able to communicate with the computer. In old days, such graphical interface was not there, and the only way to communicate was through the keyboard. But today we are able to communicate with the computer with the help of this graphical user interface. By pointing and clicking on various graphical objects, we get our work done. You can start the application by clicking on the icon. You can drag the icon, you can enlarge it, or you can close the application by closing the icon. Not only that, these days there are some software applications which can accept your hand gestures, that you have to only do some hand gestures. Suppose I want to write R. I will simply move my hand along that alphabet R, and computer will actually do that. We already have this kind of surface scanning type of interface on our mobile phones. So surface touching or surface interactive interface is already there on the mobile phone. Slowly it will come on the computer. So friends, this graphical user interface is provided by the operating system. So this is one of the important functions performed by the operating system. Now, in addition to our external peripheral devices, computer has lot many resources lying inside it. For example, there is a central processing unit, there is memory, there is secondary memory, then there are input-output devices, and then there are also so-called registers. There are special purpose registers and there are general purpose registers. So all these internal resources are managed by the operating system. Now, managing means what? I will give you a very simple example. If you have written a letter to your friend and give a print command, now the computer will, rather operating system will issue the command to the computer, and computer will issue command to the printer, and printer will start printing a letter. In the meanwhile, you give another command to print a letter which you have written to your mother. Now, as you know that printing, let us say 1 or 2 pages takes little more time, maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And by that time, if you issue the command of printing letter written to your mother, naturally operating system has to interrupt in between and stop printing of mother's letter, because the letter written to your friend is not yet complete. Otherwise, what will happen? If your friend's letter has been printed, let us say 25%, thereafter your mother's paragraph will start printing on the same paper, and there will be a confusion. So operating system takes control over these processes, and it will ensure that unless your friend's letter is completely printed out, it will not allow second letter to get printed. But as soon as the first letter is over, second letter will start printing. So in this way, operating system coordinates or facilitates proper working of internal resources. So external devices as well as internal resources are controlled by operating system. And ultimately, or rather I can say, in addition to all these functions, there are many more, but another important function is that of disk management or file management. As I told you some time ago, that there is a secondary memory. Now why there should be two types of memory? Okay, for just a small digression, even God has given us, to every human being, two types of memory. One is called as short-term memory and another is called as long-term memory. At any given moment of time, the awareness of this world happens only in the short-term memory, which is very small. On the contrary, all your experience since your childhood till date is stored in the long-term memory. Of course, you are not aware of it. But if somebody asks you a question that, can you tell us your exciting moment of your first day? So, even though we are not aware of all the content of our long-term memory, but we have the capability of retrieving any kind of experience that is stored in the long-term memory. Now, long-term memory is very, very large. So far, we have not discovered its limits. We think that it is very, very large. And as you grow, more and more experience is stored in that long-term memory, and the process continues till our death. But unfortunately, our short-term memory is very, very small, only 7 units of capacity. But then why should there should be short-term memory and why there should be long-term memory? For God's idea, I can say that short-term memory being very small, lot many things you tend to forget, and thereby our life becomes happy. We can easily forget bad moments and make life better, and if there are some good moments, of course you will also forget them, but you try to store them in your long-term memory, and whenever you want to recall and be happy, you can do that. And of course, short-term memory is very quick. We can retrieve information very fast. Long-term memory takes more time. The same thing happens in computer. All the high-speed calculations are done in RAM, that is random access memory or primary memory, and all the huge amount of data that results after processing data is stored permanently on hard disk, that is on secondary memory. Primary memory is volatile. Whatever processing is done, all that is lost as soon as you shut down the computer. Next day you start the computer, content in the primary memory is erased. Nothing remains there, it is volatile. But whatever information you have stored on the hard disk still is retained, it is still retained. So this is the basic difference. So for storing voluminous amount of data, and that too permanently, we use secondary memory, and for high-speed calculations, we use primary memory. Now primary memory being very high speed is very costly. So we cannot afford to have huge amount of primary memory like secondary memory. But the secondary memory being cheap, we can have huge amount of secondary memory. That is why these two memories are used in computer. Friends, after going through various functions that are performed by the operating system, now we talk little bit about the components of operating system. We have already covered various components of computer hardware or computer system. Now we are going to cover various components of operating system. The very first component is called as kernel. Now what is this kernel? Now kernel is the bottommost layer of any operating system which resides very close to the computer hardware. Take a very simple example. Let us say you have Windows operating system. Now in the market we have hundreds of vendors producing different types of computers. There are computers sold by Dell there are computers sold by HP, computers sold by, various other manufacturers. But the operating system which is popular in your country is, let us say, Microsoft Windows. Now, this operating system should provide the same experience to all the users, irrespective of the computer on which it is installed. So whether you are working on HP machine, or you are working on Dell machine, or you are working on, let us say, IBM machine, you should get the same user interface, you should get the same experience and same result. Now, as we know that operating system needs to be installed on all machines, and it has to work uniformly across these machines. Naturally, the bottommost layer of the operating system has to take care of variations in the machine. So bottommost part of operating system running on HP will get configured differently than the bottommost layer which is installed on Dell machine. So this kernel part, where very low type of activities are performed, is different on different machines. But all higher level layers of the operating system are nearly same irrespective of machine, and that is why kernel is very important. So kernel keeps on varying from machine to machine, but other parts of the or components of the operating system remain the same. So kernel takes care of handling all low level activities on the machine. The second component is processes that are executed in the machine. Now first let me try to differentiate between a process and a program. Now what is a program? As we know, program is nothing but a set of instructions written down to accomplish some task. And how do we execute this program on the computer? We enter this program, store it on the hard disk, and then click some icon on the graphical user interface. Now, as you know, this program simply resides on the hard disk, but when you click execute button on the user interface, the dynamic part gets loaded in the computer memory. And the execution that happens in the memory is known as a process. So process is a dynamic part that runs in the computer memory, whereas set of instructions that form a program resides on the hard disk. So friends, there is a difference between process and program. Now this process may be one or maybe two or maybe many. Now, in order to manage these processes, this operating system has to take some efforts. For example, when process is loaded into the computer memory, it starts running, and sometimes it might happen that another program needs to be loaded into the memory. For example, when working in a Microsoft Office, you are writing a letter to your friend, and all of a sudden you want to do some calculations, so you click on the Excel, so Excel also starts running. Now there are two programs which are to be executed simultaneously, and therefore now there would be two processes in the memory. So it is the duty of the operating system to ensure that the second process does not interfere with the first process. Otherwise, the data handled by these two processes will get intermingled and you will get wrong result. So handling of these processes is carried out by the operating system. Moreover, if one process is actually doing some printing on the printer, and all of a sudden second process now wants to do the printing, and as we discussed little bit early, that operating system will prevent the second process from doing any kind of printing on the printer, because yet the first printing is not over. So this is how operating system has to manage processes very effectively. Now the third component of any operating system is interrupt. Now what is this interrupt? In order to simplify the idea of interrupt, let me give you one small analogy, and that too I will give it in Marathi so that you appreciate. एक गृहिणी घरामध्ये काम करत आहे आणि तिला असं कळलेलं आहे की आज पाहुणे येणार आहेत आणि समजा तिच्या घराला बेल नाहीये आणि ती किचनमध्ये काम करते आणि दुसऱ्या ड्रॉइंग रूमच्या दारातून पाहुणे येणार आहेत. आता बेल नसल्यामुळे पाहुणे आले की नाही तिला कळणार नाहीये, तर ती काय करणार की दर 5 मिनिटाला जाऊन दार उघडून बघणार पाहुणे आले की नाही. तर असं सारखं ती दाराजवळ जाणार परत येणार, तर याच्यामध्ये तिचा खूप वेळ जाईल. तर याला म्हणतात पोलिंग मेथड. त्याच्या उलट जर आपण दाराला बेल बसवली तर ती शांतपणे आपलं किचनमध्ये काम करत राहील आणि काम करता करता जेव्हा तिला बेल ऐकू येईल तर तिला कळेल की हा आता पाहुणे आलेले आणि मला जाऊन दार उघडायला पाहिजे. तर हीच प्रक्रिया कम्प्युटरमध्ये होते. सो इन अ कम्प्युटर से एन्व्हायरमेंट some events are happening. Let us say printing is going on. So central processing unit did not keep on pulling whether the job is over or not. So the computer system or operating system need not spend its energy going to the printer and finding out whether printing is over or not. There is a concept of called interrupt. When the printing job is over, the printer will send one interrupt to the operating system, and then operating system will come to know, yes, now printing is over, I should start second process. So this handling of interrupts is done by operating system. Like in our real life, we have so many interrupts. दाराची बेल वाजते, मोबाईल फोन वाजतो, बाहेर आलेल्या गाडीचं कोणतरी हॉर्न वाजवलेलं असतो मित्रांनी का आता जाण्याची वेळ झालेली आहे, किंवा कोणी आपल्याला हाक मारतं. तर अशा प्रकारे अनेक इंटरप्ट आपल्या घरामध्ये किंवा ऑफिसेसमध्ये तयार होत असतात आणि आपण त्या अटेंड करतो. फोनची बेल वाजली तर फोन उचलतो. त्याच प्रकारे इन ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टीम देर आर व्हरायटी ऑफ इंटरप्ट्स. देर मे बी इंटरप्ट सेंड बाय द प्रिंटर, इंटरप्ट सेंड बाय कीबोर्ड, इंटरप्ट सेंड बाय मायक्रोफोन, बाय माउस, बाय लेट अस से द फोन that you are connecting. Not only that, there are other software applications which can also create the interrupt. So all these interrupts are handled by operating system. Then the next component is called as memory or multitasking. Now this multitasking memory management is done by the operating system. Now in order to carry out any operation, as we know that memory is important. Suppose we want to do 5 into 3. So computer has to first store 5 in one location of memory, 3 in another location of memory, and the what I can say opcode for doing multiplication is to be stored in, that is instruction, is to be stored in still third memory. So while doing this multiplication, it will access that information from different locations and then carry out the multiplication, and the final result, that is 5 into 3 equal to 15, will be stored in still another location. So in this way, memory is to be managed by the operating system. Now you will say that what is that difficult? I mean, how it is difficult? No, it is really difficult because sometimes the programs that you have written and the data that needs to be handled is so large that data plus instruction or a process cannot be accommodated in the physical memory. Your physical memory may be smaller in size than the size of the process. So when size of the process is very big, that cannot be fitted inside the RAM, and then it is the duty of the operating system to ensure that even in that case the process is properly executed. Now you may wonder, I mean, how does it handled? What the operating system does when the process is larger than the memory size, then this operating system will divide the process into small pages and try to load certain amount of pages into the memory at a time. when those pages or that part of the process is executed, that will then be removed and sent to the hard disk. Next pages will be loaded into the memory, and this is how process gets executed part by part. So it is handled piecemeal. So this is the duty of the operating system. So operating system actually manages the memory. Now there is another important aspect, that of handling the disks or file system. As we know that files are to be stored on the hard disk, and naturally these files are to be stored very systematically. As in our offices or maybe at home, we try to store things very systematically with the help of cabinets and drawers. We store our important items in different cabinets, and that too in different drawers. Similarly, in a computer, the files related to one task are stored in one directory. The files which are collections pertaining to different kind of tasks are stored in a different folder. So all this management of files and directories on hard disk or maybe on pen drive is carried out by the operating system. So this is still another important component of operating system. Another component of operating system is device drivers. So device drivers are equally important, because when a new device is to be connected to the computer, as we know, there are hundreds and hundreds of vendors and manufacturers in the country or in the world, and they have variety of devices that need to be connected to the computer. Now any operating system will never be aware of all these devices, and therefore there would be a difficulty encountered in connecting new device. So what is the solution? The solution is device driver. Every manufacturer of hard disk or maybe a mouse or keyboard or any other device actually provides a device driver, which is nothing but a small software. Now this small software or a device driver needs to be installed on the operating system, and thereafter the operating system becomes aware of that hardware, and it is capable of handling that device. Take a very simple example of your new mobile phone. Let us you buy the latest smartphone, and now you want to transfer all your images to a computer, and say your operating system is old operating system purchased in, let us say, 2010. During 4 years, new version of operating system, let us say Windows 8, has come in the market, and you are not using that. So in that case, there will be a mismatch. So when you try to connect your new mobile phone, the operating system will reject that device and will say that it is not compatible. So there are now two solutions. One solution to upgrade your operating system to Windows 8, or install the device driver given by the manufacturer of that smartphone on the operating system, and then you are able to transfer the data. So this is how device drivers are handled by the operating system. The next component is networking. Now what is this networking? Networking is nothing but connection of number of computers. When you try to connect number of computers either in office, either in home or anywhere. Now you might say that at home I have only one computer, so where is the question of connecting with the network? Yes, if you have an internet at home, and when you are using internet, that means you are actually getting connected with a even bigger network. So in fact, internet is nothing but a network of networks. So network is everywhere. Now transferring the data, sending data to the network, getting data from the network, and processing it, all that happens through the operating system. So operating system also has to take care of this networking. So networking is equally important component. The next component is security part. Security part means handling passwords. Now when you are using a computer, it might happen that some unknown person comes to your computer when you are not there and tries to steal some data, your personal data. Or when you are connected to the internet, some unknown user sitting at long distance may actually access your machine and siphon the important data of your interest. So how do you secure your data? So security management is also handled by the operating system. Operating system provides you the facility of authentication in the form of login and password, and many more methods are there, but I will just explain the login and password. So for every new user, you can create a login and password. Your, let us say, brother, your sister, your friend may have different login and different password. You can have your own login and password. So you can access your personal data through your login password. Your friend can access his data through his password. Once you secure your data through your password, he will not be able to access that. So this is how the security is managed by the operating system. So management of security is very important as far as the security of data and other information is concerned, and that is also taken care of by the operating system. The next important component is API or user interface. Application programming interface is very important because many application softwares written for any domain cannot directly access the hardware because there is vast variety of hardware. As I told, there are different companies like IBM, Dell, HP, Zenith, and so on. So writing lower level routines, for example, taking printout. So application software developer will have to take so many printers into account and write software, rather different software for different devices, and that is going to be a very cumbersome thing. The very simple solution is that operating system provides the application program interface. That is a set of instructions, set of commands are provided by the operating system so that application developer can directly use that application programming interface and access the device. If that person wants to store some file on the hard disk, he will call some API and directly send data to the hard disk, or vice versa. Suppose he wants to read some file from the hard disk, he will actually call that. So in this way, using interrupt, any hardware part of the computer can be accessed by any application program. So friends, these are some of the important components of operating system. Now there are various operating systems. There are variety of operating systems starting from supercomputers, mainframe computers, mini computers, microcomputers, notebook computers, tablets, then smartphones. So many types are there. Now discussing and talking about all these variety of operating system is a separate topic in itself. So we cannot cover all that material in this lecture, but to make you aware that these are the types of operating systems that are available in the market. Then I would like to give you some examples of operating system. The very popular operating system in our country is the Microsoft Windows. Then there is a Macintosh operating system, very popular on Apple type of computers. Then there is Linux. Linux operating system is used on servers, and Android, as you know, is very popular on smartphones or cell phones. Friends, there are further divisions of operating system, namely batch operating system, multitasking operating system, time sharing, distributed operating system, network operating system, real-time operating systems. In short, I want to tell you that the topic of operating system is so vast that it will take some time to go through its details and then understand and take benefits of these very important topics in School of Computer Science. Then there is a concept of multi-programming. All modern operating systems are so powerful that they can execute more than one program simultaneously, so all of them are multitasking. And then at the end, I would like to tell you one very important thing, that of virtual machine. Suppose you have two friends. One friend is interested in running Linux application. Other friend is interested in Windows operating system. Third friend is interested in, let us say, Android. Now these three friends want to run three operating systems and specialize. But unfortunately, all these three friends are living, sharing a common room in a hostel, but they have only one computer. Now, if a Linux person wants to work on the computer, he has to delete all other data, remove all earlier operating system and install Linux. And when the Windows person wants to work on that, he has to again remove everything, install Windows. So things would be very difficult, life will be very difficult. Now I would like to tell you that now new operating systems have this capability. They can install a virtual machine, and on virtual machine there is a very thick layer. It separates the operating system and hardware and provides a very clean layer of virtual machine. So for every Linux friend, it can provide Linux machine, virtual machine for Windows and for say Macintosh. So in this way, three virtual machines can be installed on one machine. That is the power. Friends, now let me summarize. In today's lecture, we covered few important points, namely what is an operating system. Then we covered basic functions of the operating system. Then we also studied components of operating system in detail. And then we also talked about types of operating systems, and I gave few examples of operating system like Linux, Macintosh and Windows, and at the end I talked about virtual machines.